Hey, it's Kurt.
Let's see if we can get. I don't know. I don't know if we can get. You know how Kurt can be. He might be like. Oh, Kurt. Maybe he's at work. Well, I tried. I don't think Kurt's gonna make it. I think Colin might be here in a minute.
Yeah, Colin's too busy ranting in the chat.
Oh yeah.
I don't get how he like just sends walls of text while driving.
Is he doing audio dictation or is it really him typing?
I think he's typing. I think he just steers with his knee or something. I mean, it's a truck. You're not like, it's not like he's turning.
That's true. So, he's going like straight. You know what I mean? Like it's just going one direction. It's not
that's
like
why I'm serious when I ask him. Like, do you guys have autopilot yet? Like, I don't see why. Like, eventually they won't have it.
You remember that Simpsons about that, of course, right? There's like a Simpsons about the autopilot trucks, and like all the truckers. It's a secret. None of the truckers are allowed to tell. You know?
I didn't see that.
How the Simpsons did it. It was a Treehouse of Horror episode. Do you guys remember the episode where Bart has an evil twin?
Oh yeah, totally.
But it turns out he's the evil twin because he's the one that has a scar on the side or whatever. And I was like, oh my god, that's Jordan Peele's Us.
Oh man, I never thought about that. Yeah, I have to rewatch Us because I saw that Simpsons more recently than I saw Us. I hadn't remembered. But yeah, I mean, I guess Kurt's not coming. We could just start without him. You guys about ready to start?
Sounds good.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm sure he'll pop in.
Okay. Yeah, well, I'm not sure of anything, bro. You can't be so sure of reality. You know what we do? We're going to hybrid Portman do a little bit of both then. Let's just do Wednesday Ultras intro then. I don't know. We'll give him like 10 seconds of Kurt. Here you go.
The following video contains content some viewers might find disturbing. The views and opinions expressed here are not facts and are nothing more than entertainment. The views and opinions are not facts and do not represent the views and opinions of Xirtus or our channel, and do not necessarily represent or reflect the views of the guests, YouTube, Google, mainstream media, society, or civilization at large, or anybody. Viewer discretion is advised.
So I just want to listen to more music. I got this whole other one here. Check this out. Can't help myself. I
Let's
love
just start
your...
a band.
I know, like, right? Like, we should start a band every day, and it should have a new... We have to come up with a new... Not just a band, not just a new album, a new genre. Like, it has to be a new band name, new genre. Like, you have to do the whole thing every day. Like, South Park, an entire new band every day.
It's a lot of work.
Don't cry, Andrew. I just want to say, Vince, I love your hair. It looks really... Like, I don't know if you remember In Sync as well as I do, but you look like the bad boy, which is pretty sweet. And Jack is here, being nimble and quick. Like, I feel like you're dressed so that you don't hit yourself with your own truck.
Yeah.
What's up, bro?
Yeah, pretty much, because everything is pretty big out here. You can all see each other. I'm just in here so I can hear you guys. I have to do some work right now, so I'm going to go. Love you. Bye-bye.
All right, that's based. That's based.
Yeah, bro.
Cool.
Okay, so I got something that I'd like to bring up. Andrew just wrote in the chat, if you can turn schizophrenia into productivity, it can be branded as art. I want to talk more about that. Can you expand on that, Andrew?
I tried my hardest to just distill all the crazy thoughts into that. Expanding on, I don't know. Yeah, there's a lot of the best artists you could argue are, you know, mentally unwell or neurodivergent or straight up schizophrenic. I mean, there's that study that they did with one particular mental patient who was suffering from schizophrenia, where they did portraits of a cat. And as their disease progressed, their portraits became more abstract. It was like feeding it into the AI, like more psychedelic, more like, you know how you see those memes where they're just like begging AI to like make something like the most ultimate, I don't know, weird
Happy.
space.
Well,
Yeah, exactly.
I've heard of artists that have certain types of brain damage, and once they get the brain damage, they become able to create like absolutely incredible psychedelic art that resembles DMT trips, and you know, like the idea that the schizophrenia is really, it is just an idea. It's a cultural concept that we've applied to the phenomena, but it's not objective, because in other cultures it wouldn't be considered schizophrenia. It wouldn't be called that. In other cultures, generally, it was considered to be a shamanic traits or shamanism in some form.
Mystical.
So, yeah, mysticism, magic, all these things, and to restrict it to schizophrenia puts it within a medical and scientific secular context.
Pathologized.
It tries to demystify mysticism, and it doesn't actually work, because art is mystical, because that's always been the magic trait that sets us apart from the rest of nature. And so to call it schizophrenic basically goes, well, you should be on this medication and you should be forced to be this way, instead of, you know, allowing yourself to, say, explore the boundaries of culture and of self and of reality freely. So you could turn it.
You could even argue.
I think it's because the problem is that art and entertainment they can't be torn apart in our culture. We're like, you have to frame it as entertainment, while it's much more a spiritual experience than anything else, because a true piece of art that moves you changes your life, and it defines you, and it shapes you for the rest of your being, while entertainment is just a passing thing that makes you feel good for a little bit. So it's a product you consume, as opposed to a shamanic experience and a spiritual experience.
Back to what you were saying about art, I feel like I mean, generally speaking, how you say like art can't be separated from entertainment. I mean, I feel like that's for the most part true, but you also consider like I'm sure there's amoral forms of art. Like, I don't know, you might be one of those people who might consider like war a form of art. I mean, there's like a really good argument, because if you think about it, there's like all this intention that goes into this act, and it uses like literally everything from the fabric of reality, like time, space, earth, the seas, fire, and you have like specialists from every craft you could think of, and just the idea of it, you know, like basically at the end of the day, no one's fighting to really to make the world uglier. Like when it comes to intention, they're kind of trying to beautify the reality in their own way. I don't think it's right. I don't think it's like correct, which is why I think it's like amoral. But there's still an argument that could be made that it's an art. So I think that's like one of the very rare examples of art that's definitely not meant to be entertaining. But I mean, objectively, it's really just a form of negotiation. But yeah, even that too, even negotiation could be an art form, I guess. So
Yeah, it depends if we like where we draw the line between art and artisanship, and so like because it's creativity as a whole, and art is like a reflector, while creativity is like a tool generator. So it's hard to like. I mean, if you we can technically say that the line is there's no real line, that anyone who designs or an engineering structure, that's an artist because they're putting drawings on a page to build the blueprints. But like, hey, I don't know, like these are words. Obviously, the real thing, like art it challenges linguistic structures that culture has generated and creates new languages, like visual art as a form of language. Like the term a picture's worth 1,000 words. Well, that's because it actually does talk in its own way, and we have to decode it basically. So it really pushes those boundaries and forces the mind to think of symbols differently, as opposed to just something that we express with our words.
yeah, I
So,
thought it was.
yeah.
I remember Andrew kept saying before how like monster. I mean, I was saying that art, a good art, the most powerful forms of art, kind of reflect like divine truths or wisdom in like indirect or direct ways, and like Monsters Inc. was like the perfect reflection of how like of how
Yes.
yeah, yeah, that was really funny. Like there's forces out there that's harvesting our like screams and feelings of terror, and it doesn't have to be that way, but apparently like that's just really potent, a potent form of, I guess, spiritual food for
Right.
demons or
Well,
whatever.
the movies end with laughter being just as, if not more, potent. So
Yes. Yeah. I think it was. I had this realization while I was at work that like pain is cheap, but peace is free. But you don't realize how to. It's you don't realize how to get. It's like the mental barrier to get to the peace and understand its freedom is greater for some reason. But because we understand the cost of the pain, and it's almost as I don't know, the currency is more familiar, so we're more um, apt to pay it. Whereas like the it's sort of difficult to conceptualize like acceptance as a form of peace, and like and accepting that it is free. It's like, well, how can you get something for nothing,
What's up with Dada art? Because like Dada art, you were talking earlier about amoral art, and the first thought I had was Dada, because it seems like
I
that
have
isn't the
I have something about that to say. Actually, I recently watched Freddy Got Fingered,
yeah.
and Freddy Got Fingered is like a Dadaist piece
It's
of art.
one of the greatest movies of all time. Freddy got
I don't know.
fingered.
I would not say that. That's a bold statement.
Oh yeah, no,
It's
it's
definitely
up,
one of the movies of all time.
it's up there with it's up there with Casablanca or The Shining or
It pushed boundaries, that's for sure. But I mean,
Metropolis. I think Metropolis is a good example. And this movie is one of the greatest. It's like a Lars von Trier film.
well,
I think the problem with it, people don't take it seriously because it's also funny. But comedy is a
okay.
drama
Look,
in
but
disguise.
I mean, it's also a middle finger, like in of itself. Like Dadaist art is basically like, yeah, this is a deconstruction, and we can go to the lowest rung and find the lowest tier value and claim that that's also art.
Roger Ebert said, "The day may come when Freddy Got Fingered is seen as a milestone of neo-surrealism. The day may never come when it is seen as funny." I think this is actually one of the greatest.
I agree.
Positive. I mean, I would say it is funny, and that's something that they're missing. But but honestly, this is a true statement in a lot of ways. It's not so funny as it is serious and real. And Freddy Got Fingered is a film that's about, I mean, it's about Americana at its finest, right? Like this is like somebody who wants to work in a cheese factory so that they can make it a cartoon, right? So they can make people like they want to be like to work on their art. It's just so pathetic, right? Everything about it. And that's everybody. Like, this is what everyone became after that. Like, everyone
Yeah.
wanted to become a social media star because I feel like this was the kind of energy. I don't know. I think this movie's brilliant. It's one of the most brilliant movies of all time.
Everyone wants to make their dads proud. Proud.
Yeah. For some, I think that's harder than others. You know, like I feel like I had it really easy with my dad because he was like such a violent guy and all that stuff, and all I had to do was just find like I guess
That sounds
self-love.
easy.
Yeah, I just had to find self-love. I mean, he's not stupid. He even says like, "Yeah, you definitely walked a different path than me," and I was like, "I sure did, father."
Yeah, well, everyone manages their anger differently, you know, and some people never manage to manage it. They just they access it as a source of power as opposed to converting it to something else.
Yeah, he never
And
had like music or a painting. I guess his thing is like fishing.
yeah,
I mean, he's
it,
really good at fishing.
it's
But
crazy. It's crazy to think that like like most people have never heard their fathers sing. Like to me that is an absurd thought. Just like most people I know in my generation, they sing their favorite songs loud and proud, and they just do it. But back then, like no, it's for girls, dancing and all the basic things humans have done for thousands of years. Men don't do that now. So
I mean, luckily I've seen my dad do all the silly shit because he had me when he was like 21. So there was like very little. I guess he felt like hiding from me at that age, like his drinking with his friends, his naughty 21-year-old behavior and all that shit. I remember a lot of his like fucked up antics, like because he was in like his mid-20s when I started like remembering shit, and he was like a wild ass dude.
did he do breakdancing?
No, he was like the kind of guy who would like drive like 90 to 110 miles per hour in like local highways in New York City and shit. Like just like weird shit. Like
Careless.
shooting ball bearings out of a slingshot with my godfather from their car on the highway, like ridiculous things, you know?
Ladies and gentlemen,
I remember being.
he made it. I was just really excited. Good job. Kurt is in the house. He's entered the building.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, Kurt.
What's up?
Wait, no.
Go ahead.
No, I don't know. What do I got to say? Really? Me? You first.
Wait, you're the lead, man.
Okay. I listened to a podcast about Mark Fisher, and that was
Mark
really
Fisher.
yeah, that is really good. It's like all my sources are secondary sources, and that's okay. But yeah, that was a really good episode. So, yeah, I can talk about that for like 2 minutes if you like. Okay, we'll just do it. All right. So I think with Mark Fisher, he has a lot of interesting things to say about where things are going in our system, and so he's the one that was a big proponent of like capitalist realism and talking a lot about capitalist realism, which is getting a ton of like philosophical videos about it right now. And so it's a really interesting topic, but the good way to highlight things is to say that we're so entrenched in capitalism that it's hard to imagine a world without it. It's easier to picture the end of the world than it is the end of capitalism. That was kind of a big proponent of his way of thinking. So one thing that there was a lot to get out of that podcast and a lot out of Mark Fisher's words in general. And so I think when we get into this system, we're in postmodernity and we're constantly questioning our grand narratives and we barely question the narrative of global capitalism. That seems to be like one of the grand narratives right now, is believing that capital is inherently a good thing, just basing all of your economy off of that. But how do we how do we try to find any sort of collective truth in spite of everything when we're questioning every other grand narrative that exists? And so I think really the best way, one way that we're not maybe aware of to subvert narcissism is just to at least propose the question, okay, like how do I find meaning in a postmodern society without having all of that inflecting into myself and then that developing into narcissism and just resulting in even more unhappiness. So I think even if you get to the point where you can instigate the question, how do I do that? It's just like you're already making progress. Like I think even bringing about awareness, if you have enough that much self-awareness, it's like you're already making progress on it, you know. And I think we have a society that lacks total self-awareness, you know what I mean? So yeah, if there's something nice, thank you. I love Garfield. And I don't know if that's like an AI cartoon or what, but
It is.
yeah, thank you.
We like
Nah,
it.
someone drew it. Honestly, if someone actually made
You
that,
hate
I'll call that.
Capital?
Yeah, no. No, I wouldn't say I don't
You
even
hate the capitalism.
so
Yeah.
I can take a rib and that's fine.
With AI.
Like and cartoons are great, that's fine. It seems like you can't talk about capitalism with making it look like you're just trying to be edgy and cool. Or like even if you bring up the topic capitalism, it's like people are automatically assume you just have hatred for the system.
Or
And
if
like,
you
I
love
don't
it,
know.
you're like you're a psychopath. It's like, wow, you really love this shit, really? Or it's like you hate it. It's like, all right, buddy, join the club.
Thing is
Yeah, kind of. But I think one consensus amongst a few people, including Zizek, he thinks the wheels are already beginning to come off, and like the system might be replaced quicker than people realized or are even prepared for. So I think if that's true, if things are going to get replaced much faster than even we're ready for, the best thing you can do is like honestly really just have true authentic raw compassion for people. I think that's where you get into the esoteric realm, and like when you start reading shit like, oh, in the Bible it says the meek will inherit the earth. There's a lot of ways you can interpret that, and I think the people like when there's a lot of crazy shit and a lot of people are actually losing their sanity, like the people that actually just are towards the sidelines and aren't really controlled by external forces. I think that's a good definition of meekness. They're the people that are actually going to survive because they have their sanity at the end of the day. And so I think the real issue is a big test of sanity. And there's a lot of things you can talk about with that. So that was the podcast. And otherwise, this week there's a carnival going on in my town. So that's pretty neat too.
Fucking carnivals. All right, so what you said before about how like the answer is like a raw compassion for everyone. What are like some of the roadblocks to that? I mean, we always talk about how like, I mean, esoterically, like one of the big things that a lot of people seem to agree with is this idea that like, oh, everyone's like a fragment of the same soul, oversoul, source, God, whatever. And we're basically just different versions of each other. So like to harm you is to harm me, to harm me is to harm you, et cetera, the basis of empathy and all that stuff. What would you say are like the biggest barriers to that raw compassion? If that's what we need, I mean, what are the things that's like getting in the way of that
Profit?
profit?
Because
Nice.
here's
Yeah.
the thing: capitalism polluted the environment, and then the capitalist solution to dirty air is selling respirators. So the solution isn't to clean up the environment; it's to sell a Band-Aid.
Andreas, you're muted.
You're muted.
Muted.
That's because
Muted.
I have nothing interesting to say. I think the problem with capitalism is consumerism and exploitation of the consumer, which is just back to feudalism. And that if you look at like indigenous tribes that are making baskets out of river grass, that is capitalism because you capitalize on your environment and you have positive reciprocity, right? So true. This is why people keep using capitalism as the shield for what's going on because they're like, well, you can't fight it because it's nature. Well, yeah, what is natural, but that's not what we're using. We have all of these weird systems in place, social and centralized control systems that keep free distribution, that keep voluntary trade from happening, that keep free markets from forming, that limit forums from becoming fair trading grounds for ideas and services and goods. I don't think that capitalism is really the problem.
Do you know what I think a huge problem is though? Like honestly, like
Well-
it's on a visceral level. A big factor is we're all so aware of our mortality now, and like as time goes on, that age doesn't get any higher. Like we haven't actually been living that much longer, you know, like, but our
Well,
capacity to
boomers
like,
haven't.
our
We stay
I'm just saying
younger
like
longer, though.
our capacity to like look into the future has only grown, but we become that much more aware of like how fleeting and small our lifetime or lifespan actually is. And I think that's one of the things that reinforce that feeling of like lack, which is actually the basis of all the messed up things about quote unquote capitalism or attempting capitalism.
But
It's that ultimate feeling of lack. It's we're always running out of time. We can never get any more, and that's just the tragedy of
the
life,
thing
right?
is, the problem with capitalism is that it uses a financial system that isn't based on actual anything of value, of course. So it can artificially be manipulated. Money isn't baskets, and it isn't the objects we're trading. They're stand-ins for it. They're symbolic stand-ins for it. So we have to find a way to, I guess, reduce corruption, because that's the only thing that's actually ruining capitalism. It's the same thing that ruins communism. It's the same thing that ruins pretty much everything. It's the corruption that grows from within that we need to periodically purge and destroy and rebuild from,
Right.
Okay, so
because we
you
don't have a
believe
choice.
you kind of believe in that cycle then. That's I agree with that too. It's like I call
Oh
it
yeah, yeah.
oscillation. Yeah, it's like oscillationism is when you oscillate between like a leftist tendency and then a conservative tendency, and it goes just like back and forth. And as we develop that cycle, that oscillation gets more violent and
Well,
more like pronounced.
I think that conservatives should be conserving what works, and liberals should be exploring what may work. You know, like exploring possibility. It doesn't mean one is good and one is bad. It means both serve a function. And when it becomes about power grabbing and trying to dominate, then they lose their function and it devolves into corruption. So yeah, you got to the pendulum swings. You know, we have to be open to change, and we have to work with what we know works, or else we're just going into chaos and we risk just running headlong into a wall like we are.
Also, that whole thing about like lifespans, that might not be forever. You know, like at some point, just at any given time, at this rate, we could just discover radical lifespan extension,
Sure.
you know, like where instead of the average person
Well,
living
we're
to be like
younger
60.
longer. We're younger longer now. So I mean,
Yeah.
we can say we don't have longevity, but you know, like the quality of years, because like a person after 60 gets more and more useless over the years. I mean, a person after 50, basically, and so now people in their 60s, they're taking TRT and they're spick and span. You know, they can go for a long time, and as long as they keep these practices, who knows how far steroid use and you know whatever medication they come up with for longevity will work. But that's what matters really. It's the quality of the years. It's not the number of years long term. It's if you live to 75 as opposed to 120, but you're a good 75, like a useful 75, a thinking 75, contributing 75, then that's better than a 75-year-old to 130 who's completely useless and just a burden on the systems.
Okay, about that. So to make like I guess the most of your time, even if it is fleeting, like to actually get quality years instead of just quantified, like a large quantity of years, I think a big part of that is energy, right? You need, like, no matter how much money you have, no matter how much time you have, you need energy to be able to enact positive things with those resources. Because you have plenty of people with like who are flush with cash, maybe retired, but at the end of the day, they're just like wiped. You know, like they're like, I don't want to do anything anymore. You know, like my
Yeah.
day's already yeah.
Maybe we'll
And
have like a VR retirement, just like
Oh yeah,
you know,
what was that?
hook
San
up old people,
Junipero, that
hook
was
up
a
old
Black
people to
Mirror.
Black
VR
Mirror.
sets. I think it was a Futurama as well. Set them up
I mean,
there, you know,
I'm in.
they get to experience everything instead of being cooped up in some room all alone, being abused by like medical staff and stuff. Like,
All right, so here's how we're all going to retire young. We're going to develop a way to detox our bodies from microplastics because they got all these herbs and stuff that'll like purge heavy metals from your bodies. And now, like, you know, we eat a credit card's worth of plastic every week. If we could find a way
a
to
credit
get rid
cards
of
with the
that
plastic.
stuff.
Well,
Yeah.
I've heard mealworms are really useful for that. They get rid of plastic, so you know, I'm gonna get some mealworms and
Have some symbiotic
figure out how to
mealworms.
use them on my body. I guess we'll see.
Yeah, we can get some mealworm DNA and activate that stuff in us.
Oh yeah, Come on, let's start getting some crossbreeding between humans and the mealworms.
I mean,
CRISPR mealworm DNA.
I'm really looking forward to like the use of like different frequencies of sound to do things like, I guess, wipe out viruses or like cancer in your body, like cancer cells, because apparently everything has a quote unquote resonant frequency, and if you overload it on its resonant frequency, then it just disintegrates or explodes or something like that, or just breaks down. Like you could do it with glass, you know, like singers could break glass using their voice, and that's like a real phenomenon that apparently extends to virtually everything. I'm definitely not an
They
expert
do it
on
with
this,
kidney stones, yeah.
but that's pretty
Well,
crazy.
I'm sure that if you send a vibration that's hard enough towards pretty much anything, yeah, you could probably make it pop. Just has to be hard enough, you know?
Yeah, or make something like that's really heavy able to be pushed with a lot less effort.
Lifted.
You know, like if you
Okay. All right, we're going
if you
there.
have if you have the shockwave, the shockwave of an atomic blast, you know, that's technically a frequency. It's just, yeah. Of course, things break apart with certain level of sound, but it's what's connected to that sound and what it does to 3D space that affects us as well. Because sound on its own doesn't exist in a vacuum; it exists in relation to air and to the space that it travels through.
Cymatic cancer healing. I'm about it.
Cymatics is fascinating. I think it can work. I mean, I think it's worth exploring seriously. People tend to like downplay the things that they don't understand, and they don't understand that the world and the universe is frequencies. It's all vibrating at a different frequency, and figuring that all out is probably the key to a lot of things,
Yeah,
including human
For sure.
longevity and all these things, you know.
and it's what I've always appreciated is the overlap between the way sound functions and the way light functions, because they both kind of like work along a frequency or a frequency spectrum, and you could get higher frequencies of light or sound, and you could get lower frequencies of light or sound, and it kind of works like a dilation of pitch, and it's pretty cool because I think that's one of the most like freaky ways that us as humans have figured out how to mess around with the fabric of reality. You know, other than just like moving physical matter around and arranging physical matter in different ways, like we actually figured out how to manipulate light particles and manipulate sound waves. That's and I agree with the original statement about how like that's probably the key to solving like a lot of things that's eluding us as a species at the moment.
I mean, science has been really based on like compounds and chemicals, and I think we're starting to move away from that now. But there's gonna be growing pains because of all the industry built around like patenting chemicals and compounds. And how do you patent a frequency? You know, it's I mean, I guess you could patent the process.
This was something that we were talking about earlier
you can
today.
But you can patent like songs. You can copyright music.
Well,
That's
they're
just an
doing
accumulation.
You can't though, right? Like, so that's the thing. Like, I can play a cover of any song as long as I don't use the same lyrics, and then I can change if I make a parody. Like Weird Al doesn't need to get rights to do a song, and if you're not
That's
satire, I guess, but like you can, without changing a parody or satire, you can just like play jazz versions of songs acoustically. That's fine. I can't use a sample in my rap song, but I could play the same chords and play that song in the background as long as it's not the same music.
You'll just get accused of stealing, but legally
You can be accused of it, but it's not a legal problem, right? Yeah. And so I don't know. The other thing with like drugs, so music also, like AI, they made a system that went out and copy lefted all of the possible chord progressions that people were trying to copyright, so that every possible song in the future would be public domain. So they're working on destroying intellectual property rights, and I'm for that 100%. One of the problems we talked about earlier with like Alexander Shulgin and research chemicals in the 20th century, a lot of pharmaceutical companies, and this plays into what Andrew and Kurt were saying about capitalism or consumerism or whatever it is, that they'll sell you respirators once they take away once they exploit and use up all the oxygen. So how do we work on a pharmaceutical company that doesn't want you to have a cure because it wants you to constantly have a life plan that you need to come back to the pharmaceutical company? And so how do we figure out a system that's so holistic that they figure out the best possible system rather than just how we can get in the short term more money? And it does seem like there's a system there through economy that's incentivizing that to happen. So you can say, okay, it's all just the bottom line. It's just the dollar. People are doing this for that reason. But doesn't it feel like on a larger level, there's somebody who's aware of that and is running the system and is doing it on purpose? Because I hate to say it's like a conspiracy, but like, why are SSRIs the main antidepressant? Like, there are so many other things that they could give you that are like actually work. Why are they giving you something that is mainly practical if you're trying to study the effects of neurotransmitters on people and you want to see what happens if, you know, they don't have serotonin? So it just feels like most of it isn't even just the bottom dollar. It's a bigger, grandiose conspiracy. Like, why are people spending so much effort not doing the thing that cures you so that they can study you? Because they want some there's a long-term goal there in understanding humanity, biopharmacology. Maybe they'll become immortal because they've tested it on you, whatever the circumstances, right? But that seems like a more interesting thing than just like the short-sightedness of, you know, the chaos of capitalism.
It's also population control as well. They can figure out how to regulate who gets to have children and not.
Well, and depression in our system is a big deal, and it seems to be becoming a bigger deal. And so part of we want people to get back to work, essentially. And so we involve all our treatment instead of addressing the real issue. Like, one thing that was brought up is that we attribute everything, it's just a chemical imbalance. People just get depressed sometimes. It's innate in your species. When, okay, how much is that true and how much is that a product of the world that we have physically built over the past several decades, several hundred years? And that's not a question. As soon as you ask the question, well, then maybe you have some potential of critical thinking of like, okay, who really knows anything, and what assumptions are we making that are just assumptions and just taking for granted? So that, I think that really ties into the approach, is like, that's why I think really things like antidepressants, I don't mean this offensively. If you take them, you think they help, that's great. But I think the way we've gone about our approach in treating mental health is really just designed to sustain the system, and without getting us to actually fundamentally get in and work on the things that need to be changed to fix our crisis of meaning within individuals and the wider collective society. So I don't think that's really just in the conversation. Like, how do we fix the crisis of meaning? I think none of that really even permeates I think a lot of the mainstream media, a lot of the mainstream political media on the left or the right. Like, a lot of it does ring very, very hollow. Like, corporations coming out 1 month a year and coming out for Pride Month, that's not really support of mental health. That's just like, yeah, it's just cheerleading. It's fanboyism. It's commercialism,
Exploitation.
That too. Yes, absolutely. And it's we're at the point where it seems like people just know it, but like we're so blinded by all this constant commercialism that we just go kind of meh. It's
Well,
like
I think, I
Go
mean,
ahead.
to the credit of like antidepressants and SSRI and like the big pharma and whatnot, I mean, I don't agree with their practices. I don't agree with the outcome of any of it. But I can honestly say, as a consumer, a huge sell of antidepressants is, wait, you're telling me instead of making massive life changes or like adopting healthy routines or like going through like ontological shock or like going through dark night of the soul and doing shadow work, instead of doing that, I could just take a pill and I could continue to function, and I could kind of like shove away the bad stuff inside of me into a box. And as long as I keep taking this pill, I'll be able to function and not have to like massively change my value system or like, you know, like completely redefine my like basis of reality and my bedrock of reality and all that shit. Like, I don't have to do any of that. And I could see why it's easy to lock people down with that. I could see why it's easy to it's a good sell, you know, in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like, first off, we talked about this before, giving kids speed so they can go to school, and then giving them depressants so they can sleep at night, and then giving them antipsychotics so they can deal with the shakes they get from taking the speed and the depressants is probably not as good of an idea as fixing the school. We could do the same thing with saying, how much longer are they going to really care if you work? Like, the World Health Organization does define health as social health as well. So being able to exist in a social society and to work. But why? And what do we care about work for? I mean, right now, that's what we're doing. We're saying, if you don't have meaning, we put you into a thing where you have to survive in the Maslow hierarchy of needs. How long are we going to do that for? And, you know, people having shrinks that don't really do. I mean, you have to show up and impress the shrink. Maybe what we need more is like what tech diagnostic systems. You know, you've seen this, like, people complain about it, like these fake shrink apps, but maybe that's better because you can get it when you need to. It can talk to you directly. And I think we need to stop looking at it like Freudian psychology and more like diagnostics. Like, did you do this? Did you run today? Did you exercise today? Did you drink water in the morning? Did you know, like, to make sure you get up on the right side of the bed, to make sure that you do all these things.
Oh.
Nobody does that. I don't feel like that's like a major, like, people don't pattern it like, oh, did you do all these, like, there's an objective way to live your life, like a Kantian rhythm. Did you try that, you know?
So there's a book I read a while ago called Ancestor, and in it everyone has a neural uplink, and they're all linked to Neuralink basically, and what the Neuralink does is it talks to them internally, and when they have certain neurochemical deficits, it goes like, hey, your dopamine is low. Here's one of Mozart's symphonies, and then it regulates your neurochemistry that way, as well as displaying other people's like profiles. Basically, when you look at them, you can see their information, you know. And but the idea of, like, it's like an AI babysitter. It's always there to help you regulate your own neurochemistry. It's like it's like a machine holding your hand to be like, hey, are you balanced enough, and are you able to actually function optimally? And I mean, I don't know if it's
Right.
a bad thing, but it feels
No, yeah.
it feels overbearing. But like,
No, I mean, I would caveat that and Memory Man's sentence at the same time. Memory Man said, no drug can make you mentally well. Some can help, though. And I used to think, yeah, drugs are bad. I remember like a freaking phones. I remember when I was a kid, I used to think drugs are terrible because I had heard that as a child. But my mom's a doctor, so I went to the hospital, and I'm seeing her, and she's talking to my dad and some people, and they're like, how was your day? She's like, oh, great. There's this the pharmaceutical company, the pharmacy reps came in. There's this really good new drug that's helping pregnant women with like dilation or something. And I was like, Mom, you know, you're giving people drugs, like, that's wrong. And like, she's like laughed, and that was like crazy to me. She's like, no, not all drugs are bad. Some drugs are, you know, like medicines. And so I had to understand that there's a difference there. And earlier we were talking about like ecstasy treatment with vets. So if you think about this idea of you going to a shrink and you're presenting your best self to that shrink, there's like a level of imposter syndrome, but a shrink is usually able to understand what you're presenting and like break it down, but it takes like years, and like they don't care because it's going to make as much money as possible if it takes longer. So if you just go to a bar and you're drinking at a bar, you're less likely. Like, I remember I worked at a hostel in Peru, and a British psychiatrist, like many psychologists, but particularly a British psychiatrist, told me he was like so jealous of my circumstance because everyone treats a bartender like a friend. Will tell them anything, will tell them all the problems that are going on in their lives, you know, are not really pretending the same way. Sometimes they are. Of course, everyone has a pretend same capacity, and you can be anybody. No one's assuming that you're trying to psychoanalyze them, right? The way that you would assume like a shrink is trying to break you down to shrink you. So you get so much more. Like they're just so jealous that I'm able to get that much more information out of people, but also you immediately get to drug them, right? Because you're giving them alcohol. And so you're immediately giving them the prescription. You're prescribing them, like you could give them more of a shot or less of a shot, or encourage them to drink other drinks, right? So you're able to give them something which also has a placebo effect because it's presented in a cocktail, which is this beautiful thing that's in this like environment that's supposed to make you feel good. And with that drug, they're able to process, because they're in a good mood, all of this 20 years of heartache and trouble and sorrow that they've been through in their life. And
But
they often have good results, right? Because they're
it's ritualistic as well. Like that dynamic is ritualistic. The barman takes the role of the shaman at that point, and he starts taking on the problems of the person. I found the same thing happening in tattooing and hairdressing, but I'm not a hairdresser. But in tattooing,
you should be.
Probably, but people they would tell you their problems, and you're doing a pain ritual on them, so you're making them suffer, and as they suffer, they're telling you their problems, and it's an imprint, usually representing all their internal states made manifest, whether they realize it or not. Like you can psychoanalyze a tattoo just as much as a persona, you know. But it's an interesting role. I work in a bar currently, and I see that dynamic. I can see the people who have problems who come in and they don't know how to deal with them. So they medicate with alcohol, and they talk to the barman. And that's a major part of it. You have to have that charisma and that, I guess, that special frequency that comes with the alcohol, because, you can't talk to a drunk man on mushrooms or on ayahuasca or something. Like it'll completely clash, and you might even bad trip. Like some people, if you look at them when you're on mushrooms, and problems are different, the solutions are different.
That's true. What do you think,
a couple years ago?
Andrew.
Oh, go ahead, Kurt. All right, yeah, I got diagnosed with
Be right back.
ADHD a couple of years ago, and I mean, I always knew that I kind of had it. I've known that I've had it since I was like a kid. My mom was like resistant to put me on Ritalin or whatever, because that was the big thing in the 90s, and then later on Adderall and stuff. And in my 20s, I'd taken it recreationally, and I wouldn't party on it. I would just like be very hyper focused on whatever little art project I was doing, and like just lose hours and hours and hours. And I get how it could work for productivity, but stimulants are like a major trigger for me. And um I don't want to start drinking again, because I don't know how to moderate with that. But I've found that microdosing psilocybin, like 0.5 grams, because you're supposed to take like a tenth of whatever dose you would. Anyways, yeah. So point 3 to 0.5 grams is like my sweet spot, and I'm just able to be a worker among workers without being all like twacked out, and I feel very like whole in my body, and not like super in my head or anything, which is a relief. And I'm able to not hate my job. So that's pretty cool, because for the past 6 months I've kind of been raw dogging reality, and my wife was like, something's different about you. You're just kind of more touchy and a little just more like of a raw nerve. And um yeah, I know, right? And what is ADHD? It's like, oh no, I can't engage with an environment that is not fucking, I don't know, just attractive to my senses. Wow, bullshit. Well, it's okay, so maybe if I just like turn my senses up, I can find something to enjoy in a menial task, like fucking spreading mortar and laying block or cutting it up or whatever, just bullshit construction nonsense.
Chop wood,
um
carry water.
exactly, yeah. And there is a lot of value in that. I didn't appreciate it when my stepdad was barking that to me as I was like pushing the manual mower in my yard. Like not a gas mower. It's like one of those ones where like as you're pushing it, it turns the blades, and that's what. It's like, yep, chop wood, carry water.
That's a rare Pepe right there.
Is he holding mushrooms?
I don't even know how it happened.
With this Pepe with this is like 70s Vietnamese or like South Asian Pepe, like old
you
man
can't,
Pepe.
You can't type Pepe into like I didn't do this. Like this is cursed AI. This is
sex pat. That's sex pat Pepe right there.
This is just because like it could hear you talking. Like thank you AI. I shouldn't say it. They. That's pretty big. I'm sorry. That's one of my favorites. I'm gonna keep. Oh wow.
Yo, you guys ever been to South Asia? I've been to Thailand. That's like the closest to South Asian experience I've ever like.
India, but it's different.
The food was crazy, and one thing that really like was the biggest thing that was off-putting about Thailand to me was like, you know, you go to a store or whatever and you look at a newspaper, and on the front page there's like uncensored photos of like bodies, like dudes with like holes in their heads just leaking their brains out in a chair, like shot execution, and they just put this on the front page in the papers there, and I'm like, okay, you know, that's
one way to sell a paper.
Yeah, right. I mean, maybe Thailand isn't the only country like that. Like maybe Romania is like that or something.
Dude, what the heck? Like, I almost want to report this. Like, I never report AI, but I just want to be like, you guys, like, could you keep a lookout? Like, because you don't want your AI doing that. You don't even want your AI doing that. I just put crying Daffy Duck. I have ADHD. That's what I did. I started with crying boy, then did crying frog, then I did crying duck.
Do you think that like being desensitized to real violence is better or worse than being desensitized through simulated violence? Like
I'm finding that out now.
It's so
definitely both. I think it's both. It is different.
I'm playing video games with this 10-year-old, and I played Fortnite with him, and it's really interesting because, like, when he died, like, when people, like, it feels like he's in war. You know what I mean? Like, he's like,
to him, it matters.
He's freaking out, and like when he dies, like even though
sweating,
we get like second place, but like he died. You know
I
what
remember. I remember being a kid back in the day, and like I'd play games and I'd get attachments to the characters that I'd have. Like I'd play Digimon on PS1, and then I would bring it up, I would raise it, and I would become a champion, and then it would die. And then I'd be like, "Oh, my child heart! Like I feel heartbroken." You know,
I feel like it's only happened to me like 2 or 3 times. Like a Star Wars episode, like Star Wars: Knights of the Old Republic was really brutal because, like, I'm like, wow, these people like live for me. And yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I think for me, one, it was Metal Gear Solid 3. That was the game that like really fucked me up. But because like I was a huge fan of the series, and that just the way that concluded was pretty crazy. And also the second thing was, as far as like being desensitized to real violence, you know, I'm like. It's a double-edged sword, because on one end, yeah, it's fucked up, you know, as a kid going to like liveleak.com and watching like cartel torture execution vids, and you're like, what the fuck? But then you get older and you have that shit in your memory, and you're like, first of all, why is that a thing? Like, how does that happen in this reality? Like, I don't understand. And you think about that and you put some thought into it, and it connects with this whole like illegal immigration narrative and all that shit. And it all boils down to the fact that the U.S. government set up these psychotic, murderous drug lords to rule this country, and the people who fund them, the people who give them the resources to enable these like ridiculous acts of like torture and murder, like comical levels of violence, like seriously, no joke. And it's us. We do that as Americans. Like every time we do a street drug, like cocaine, Molly. That's us, like literally funding that kind of violence, and which really goes. It's just kind of. It's also political, because like when I think about people like Americans complaining about like, oh, illegal Mexicans coming into our country, I'm like, first of all, they're running from something. You know, like they're running from something that's worth running from. I've seen the videos. Like we don't have shit like that as much coming out of America. Out of there, it's like fucking crazy.
But the thing is, you know that exists, right? And it's better that you know, even if it comes at the price of trauma. But like that's the weight of power. That's the weight of knowledge. That's the like you know too much now. You feel that weight, but that's worth knowing. I would never go back. I would never go back to not knowing.
Yeah, but it's so
I would
different.
do the
So like if
cipher.
you're in a real like circumstance, you don't
Cipher's
want
dilemma.
you don't so like there's a
It's a
like,
Gordian knot.
you don't zone like in movies they make it seem like you zone out, like you're like, oh, like you don't do that or you die, like you were like really attentive, and you don't scream like you do in a video game. Like when the kids are screaming, it's like they can't hear where the gunshots are coming from, like, right, like you have to be focused and quiet and still and also attentive, and I don't know, it's really I
Right.
think it's important. Kids should know what it's like. Maybe.
So do you think video games are training us in a way? I mean, they're training us like they're called battle royales. Battle royale is about taking children. The book Battle Royale is about taking children and making them kill each other for political gain
Yeah.
and control.
Or
And
there's
that's
like
kinda,
That's what
kinda
we're
there's
doing
like-
now, but we're simulating it, and then they're just all having fun. But like they yearn for killing, and they yearn for
no,
the mind.
it's real shit. First of all, you get a game like War Thunder, and their forums have been under heat because they've like literally had leaked like actual government class like schematics for like weapons that shouldn't be released to the public, and they were like, no, see, this is inaccurate in this game, because if you look at the actual blueprints for these actual things, it's like, no, this would never be like that. And you're like, first of all, how the fuck did you get this shit?
so
Which-
so fun
Those
fact,
are really
fun,
autistic.
fun fact on Battle Royale. Battle Royale did not start in Japan, right? Like Battle Royale maybe started in Europe, like you might have said, like British and French people, but particularly it was popular with American slave owners using slaves. And it was, bare knuckle boxing and wrestling and fighting to the death, right? That was first not to the death, but like pretty close to the death, like to knockout, and like again bare knuckle and just carnage, and then it was like essentially to the death, right?
So were they doing it like they would take a group of them and then make them all fight like in a battle royale, or is it like one-on-one?
I think it was like 20 people or something like that in like a brawl. Like so basically like mini gang war, like a mini gang war kind of thing, but done by the elite would watch it. So it's more like a forced.
This is like some Yu-Gi-Oh shit. Like they're
Yeah,
simulating it
Japanese
now,
people
but now
study-
back then they would be with like real bodies
Yeah,
and real people.
And this wasn't just in Europe, like in America. Like in America, like people would watch slaves fight to the death, in like these battles. There's a place in California called Big Bear Lake, right? Where like they took bears and they had nooses on either neck, and they would force the bears to fight, and they would gamble. And the people were psychopaths at that time.
Right. So why spend
Call
billions and
Freddy,
billions of dollars to create these simulations and devote them to children?
So
too?
it's interesting because Battle Royale is like the lore of the game is that there's like a metaverse kind of thing, like the
crazy lore,
the Loki metaverse thing, and like
everyone's
being pulled in.
They did that in hindsight.
Originally,
no.
Yeah, the original version of it is that the universe is pulling in things that are forced to fight in a battle royale, and when they die, they're recycled into the battle royale, and like the apocalypse is happening every 20 minutes because it's a new universe being created, like out of the storm of like everything.
You're talking about Fortnite right now?
Yeah,
it's Fortnite lore. It's like mid to high brow. I was
like
surprised when I
Scientology.
heard this shit.
Yeah.
It's like
I was like, what the fuck?
What are they
the
putting
VR
into children's
version,
minds? But the multiverse is being the multiverse in the context of culture and the way that it's used is corporate differences. It's the different corporations.
It's still weird.
It's
like
different universes that are owned by different people. So
but consider the fact that
multiverse within DC, the multiverse within Marvel, the multiverse within Fortnite, the multiverse within this and that. But when it collapses, it just becomes business. It's the corporate verse, basically.
but still, back in the day, only nerds were thinking about like multiverses if they were reading comic books. Nowadays, kids are actually like, just from if you watch like Marvel movies or if you play Fortnite, like you're thinking about like quantum mechanics and like multiverses and shit. Like that's pretty novel for humanity. I don't remember a time when like 6-year-olds were talking about, oh yeah, I'm from this multiverse or whatever. I'm like, oh, that's cool, I guess.
We can see how far it really how far the human mind has gone and how much potential there is for growth, because I guess the multiverse conclusion with like manifesting in individuals is auto generation. You can be like, okay, I can conceptualize myself in another multiverse and then embody that idol and manifest as it. And so you can basically justify any version of yourself and then become that version of yourself if you will it so, and simulate it hard enough.
You know what? It's
Have you,
interesting you said that. Oh, sorry. What were you saying?
Oh, I was just gonna bring up the A24 movie Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Great
Where
movie.
Yep, yeah. They kind of touch on that subject a little bit about being able to channel certain versions of yourself from alternate realities and whatnot. Um, I think Jack was talking about that, about a about a future, an alternate future version of himself visiting him or
Right.
something on.
Future version, divergent selves, but you know, even if they just only conceptually, they can serve a function, because it's the limit of your imagination functionally. Like, what if the human mind is that gateway to the multiverse, and then that's how
Mm.
we access the pool of infinite information? It's all there in all the potential versions of ourselves, and you know, we just suddenly get ideas of nowhere. It's because we
And
pull them from.
we could unlock it through practice. You know, something as simple as like I say, like there's like low level practices, but they could open up to like really like crazy shit. Where I say, for example, if you want to make contact with your future self, you know, you just write a letter to your future self, or you do favors for your future self, that like, you know, like stuff that you could do now that your future self can look back on and say thank you. You know, like they would be grateful for that. And you put some thought into that, and you kind of like not like directly separate it like to like depersonal or dissociate from it, but more in a sense where you have more dimensions to your self perception. You know, what's up, Colin?
Hey,
Take the best.
I have really bad connection right now, but I wanted to hop in if I could, and I'm trying to move my truck into a position where I can get just enough connection to say it. If you guys don't mind, there is something that's really important to me that you guys touched on a little bit. Just in case somebody in this communicate that, like I get
We're
it,
losing you.
medications, pharmaceuticals,
Damn.
it looks like all the time, like, no, it's not really. Can you guys even hear me?
Barely.
It's chopping up.
Can you guys hear me?
A little clearer.
I love you, Colin.
Colin,
Biden is
turn off
using
your
a
camera.
geospatial laser.
Love you too.
to,
turn off your camera
Can you
and
guys,
maybe
can
your
you guys hear
audio.
me right now?
Yeah, maybe turn off your camera and see if your audio works clearer without it. Oh, we froze out. No, yeah, just turn off your camera because I think
No.
it might work.
I think we just with Colin, he's got like a lag. You know, it's
Oh,
like it's like whatever we say to him, he's gonna hear 1 second later than everyone else, probably something like that.
He's also surrounded by radio frequencies in the cab
Yeah.
of his truck.
So I don't know. So you guys, I just want to spit this out really quickly. Is that like I was really resistant for a long time, very detrimental. Is somebody out there listening? It's very at years, you know, like what else am I way trying to figure it out myself. And I used them anyways because I didn't know what to do, and it turned out that it was the only way for me. And I'm really lucky that I'm here right now because I was at the end of my rope, and I just want somebody that they're considering like people shit. Like, yeah, they are, but I think the research that went into specific people actually, so you guys hear that at all, that may give you.
I'm
This is
90%
amazing.
certain he's sharing about
Jesus
his
Christ, man.
personal experience with mental health issues and how pharmaceuticals helped his particular case, and about his like personal stigma that he may have had against it until trying it and it working for him, and I totally get that. And I know a number of people whose brain chemistry has benefited from these tools, which I kind of view as like a form of steroids. It's like but a mental steroid where it sort of it lightens the load to let you do like normal everyday functions. Mentally, it lightens the mental load. It frees up your mental bandwidth by making this one difficult, really challenging, potentially traumatic thing into not such a heavy burden to bear. And I'm fairly certain that that's what I decoded from his Daft Punk
Garbled stuff. All right,
vocoder.
no, that's
Kurt's
valid.
extraction.
But the way I see it, I feel like I'm more comfortable with the idea of like using drugs or, substances to say like solve minor problems. Whereas to solve major problems in your life, that's what you need something beyond a substance. That's when you need like actual radical change in your habits and patterns. Like,
Yeah.
like actually
Oh, yeah.
deep rooted changes in your like the way you think, feel, and act, like shit like that. Whereas if it's just like, dude, I'm stressed out right now, I could use a cigarette, like, or whatever, like that seems fine to me, okay. But like if it's like something that, in the long run, like I can't not like wring someone's neck, unless I take this pill, like that's like scary. Like that's what if you don't get the pill? Are you gonna fucking kill someone? Like
those things could potentially serve as a stepping stone, though. Like I spoke last week about the nightmare cocktail that I took, and I'm pretty sure it was the LSD that saved me, because whatever I was channeling through that one particular string that I was hanging on to was telling me, you need to stop doing all of this shit. Like, other people might be able to moderate themselves and do things casually, but like you just need to cut it out. And I really held on to that idea, and I think it saved me. I think it saved me because if I had messed around with like every other ingredient in that cocktail, it just would have. I saw that I played the tape forward. I saw how it all unfolded. I fucking Doctor Strange avatared my fingers and saw all potential futures. And the LSD was like, you need to stay sober. So,
Gunwoo made it. What's up, Gunwoo?
So I was playing
Yo.
Victoria 3, and then was checking in with Facebook, and then you messaged me.
That's more like it. So you had posted something recently on your timeline that was like, what did you say? It was like you feel like when people are over 30 and they're still complaining about depression.
that was me.
What?
I said that.
Oh, you did that.
No, that wasn't
yeah.
me.
That's even better. All right, cool. Well, you're useless. It was all Chris.
No,
I didn't even want to give you credit for that. That was like the best post I ever seen. Post that
Oh
again.
no, I said if you're over 30 complaining about depression to anyone other than the therapist, you're like that weird 10-year-old kid in your 5th grade class who still breastfeeds. And people got a kick out of that for some reason, because I think like I tapped into this idea where there probably was that one weird kid in one of your elementary school grades that was still breastfeeding that shouldn't have been, or something.
yeah, put
Like,
it in a bottle at least.
Apparently, like if you breastfeed like a long time, doesn't it like increase your IQ or something like that?
oh man, that person becomes like an evil genius.
Yeah.
Yo, check this out. The cannabinoid receptors in our brain are there because of compounds that are in breast milk. So when they say that babies are milk drunk, they're actually milk stoned. And you got to think, like, breast milk is what is fueling all this intense mental and physical growth in infants. And there's actually like a huge black market for breast milk in the bodybuilding community as well. But yeah, no, I think it's hilarious that the cannabinoid receptors in our brain are there because that is the keyhole for the key that is in fucking breast milk, and just so happens to also be in this plant.
Dude, social breastfeeding is the future. I mean,
Yo, dude, I bet you in Star Trek they could just like manifest or conjure like the most potent and nutritious breast milk at any given time.
Oh my god! So as soon as you mentioned the whole breast milk stone thing, the first thing that came to my mind was that the human body naturally produces anandamide, which was one of the biggest arguments for THC legalization back in the 2000s. People were saying, hey, THC has the exact same, or pretty much the exact same molecule as adenine, which our body naturally produces, which you get into the whole, like, you know, Joe Rogan stoned ape theory type shit on that contingency. But yeah, this, holy shit, I didn't realize that you're transferring pretty much THC molecules to your child through breast milk.
Getting your baby stoned by getting stoned by feeding it your breast milk, and then baby gets stoned.
Yeah, I mean, isn't there like there's also an opiate in milk so that the calf or the baby will become addicted to it, so that they'll constantly come back to the mother, right?
Yeah, like oxytocin, basically. Super high dose of oxytocin.
Prior to the pasteurization of milk from the Rockefellers, it used to be milk used to be healthy because of lactobacillus cultures, which, you know, human beings were naturally attracted towards as a survival instinct, because it's our only immune system fortifier prior to modern medicine.
Can I just say
and
something
now
about
milk
drugs?
is having almost the opposite effect. Yeah,
I just want to say one thing real quick about drugs. It almost feels like the illegal ones are the good ones, and the legal ones are the shitty ones. You know?
Shit, what do you think that is?
I don't think drugs are the problem. Whether it's like, you know, like psychotropic drugs, whatever. I think it's the distinguishing between, oh, these drugs are okay, these drugs are not okay, but these drugs are okay. It's like, why? No, I think that's like the war on drugs, first of all, was a huge failure. Nobody could say that was a success. Like that was just that was a disaster, like objectively.
It was a go ahead, sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I was just gonna say there's no moral basis behind it either. It's like it's either one drug. It's either none of them are bad or they're all bad. So you can't. I mean, I'm smoking weed. I'm drinking booze right now. I consider those drugs.
I disagree. I disagree, man. I disagree. There's some bad drugs out there. Not all drugs are good.
I think it's a spectrum. It's a spectrum. Some
cyanide is not a good drug.
Schedule 1 drugs tend to be more spiritually beneficial, which is why, you know, methamphetamine and cocaine and heroin are classified as Schedule 2, because there's a medicinal benefit to them.
I think some drugs are straight up demonic, and they will
agree.
Like PCP. I've never seen anyone have a good time on PCP. I've never personally had a good time on PCP, and I've done it like twice.
Tried PCP?
Well, I think that to be fair to like all aracyclohexamines, dissociatives in large doses and for chronic usage can be dangerous, but they're definitely safer than.
First of all, I don't think anyone should do PCP. I should say.
I don't think anyone should do.
Nobody should be doing that.
I think the problem is our society pushes like opiates more, and I think that medically, if doctors were to use dissociatives, like ketamine is a PCP. A lot of different kinds of drugs that they use for medicine, for local anesthesia, for dentistry, and for surgeries. It's safer to use PCPs than it is to use fentanyls. So in certain circumstances, I think it does make sense for doctors to switch to different aracyclohexamines, right? And not all PCPs, like PCEs too, like that we were talking earlier on the show, earlier today about 2-oxo PCE, which was a methoxetamine drug that was invented by this kid in Israel who had lost his wrist, right? I thought that was a really important development, but then the UN banned it because pharmaceutical companies couldn't make any money off it because it was basically open sourced. Like once the chemical formula was out there, anyone could make generics. So it was disincentivized. And so what they do is they make a drug, and by the time it's longitudinally tested, it's out of copyright and generics exist. And so then they start producing a new drug, and then they constantly push the newest drug that they can own, and they don't want anyone to ever use something that's like 5 or 10 years old, because then you could get a generic version of it. So, I mean, this is kind of like the thing I'm seeing is there are really great options out there, and like PCP is not actually as bad as it sounds. It's just interesting. The one that they're using, like the most extreme form of PCP, is available in like Washington, D.C. for street gangs, right?
Like Black Milds dipped in formaldehyde and started.
But think about that. Like, I'm not saying there aren't really brilliant community college, like lower income African American students that could become chemists and learn how to make drugs. But do you really think that this is like the Fresh Prince of Breaking Bad, or is it more likely? I mean, right? Or is it more likely that if this is in Washington D.C. and this is out of Upjohn, that like because like the PCP was invented because the CIA was looking for a non-addictive substitute for codeine, so it's more likely that the reason why is it the Crips that are getting all of the PCP is through the connection to like the CIA, which is like this. I mean, is it that different than cocaine in this? I mean, like it's
when Chris was talking, I was going to mention after he was finished like this all starts with the Iran Contra. It really goes back to the 1880s, but I mean, it really from my 15 years of studying conspiracies, I've come to the realization that our government operates with intentional incompetence. It's both intentional, as in like formulated plans, but also on top of it mixed in with incompetence. So the thing is, after the whole blowback from Iran Contra, they were trying to, tie up all the loose ends, try to cover up their entire how far the network actually got, was it how big the network was actually out there. Like they were trying to shut that down as soon as possible because New York Times, back when journalism were actually doing its job, they were catching on. So they hired a lot of Prince Hall Masons to tie these loose ends, like they do with pretty much any other any operation dealing with the Black community. They utilize Prince Hall Masons to kill people like Malcolm X, for example. But yeah, this ties back into the 1800s, like I was saying. So like when America's success and its success with civilization, it was entirely dependent on apothecaries and holistic medicine from Native Americans and such, and also Chinese immigrants from gold mining. Prior to then, the average American didn't really have medicine. A lot of these European immigrant cultures were bringing, like Germans, for example, Salzburg Germans, they were bringing them with them mushroom picking culture, stuff like that. Holistic means of medicine, utilizing food as medicine. So we had apothecaries out the ass all across the U.S., but then the Rockefeller Commission wanted to replace holistic medicine with this. He wanted to pretty much put a price tag on every facet of life. And one of his core theses being medicine with partnership with Andrew Carnegie to make every facet of life dependent on petroleum products. So yes, it's objectively bad for you. But yeah, he bought out all the American collegiate societies, the entire school system, the Board of Education. He bought all these people out to perpetuate this idea that, hey, modern medicine good, ancient herbs bad. Even though all of pharmaceuticals derive their medicinal properties and structures from holistic plants. It's the reason why we were cutting down the Amazon rainforest to begin with, because of the sheer amount of nutrition and vitality a lot of those rare species of plants carry. So instead of consuming an emulated form of holistic medicine, why don't we just eat it from the source, like every culture has done? And I remember one of your old videos, Andreas. My whole tangent on researching medicine started with your old video about talking about how the Japanese were immune to the atomic bombings due to probiotics alone, and then which led me to a tangent and deeper diving in my culture, the Koreans. Led me to the rabbit hole. In 1952, the United States Air Force dropped anthrax bombs all over North Korea, but with little to no casualties because everybody was using doenjang, which is a soybean paste.
I love that. It's Korean soul food, right?
Yeah, exactly, bro. Doenjang prevents cancer. That's the craziest. And also, it makes you immune to anthrax. So not only does it make you immune to acute radiation syndrome, biological weapons, and also cancer, on top of all that, crazy. Why the fuck are we still depending on pharmaceuticals for this when we literally have inexpensive remedies on hand that's been culturally known for thousands of years?
Yeah,
well, medication.
So the soy boy thing is a CIA psyop to keep us.
It doesn't have to be soy. It could be anything. Like it's the culture
fermenting.
Fermentation. Yeah,
But
the fermented products is good for your gut. You could do the same with kefir yogurt. What were you saying?
There's a distinction between medication and drugs. but drugs are medication. But when it comes to the medication aspect, well, that's a system of control. And so if they gave everyone proper health and proper medication, then we'd have a whole bunch of healthy people running around being able to revolt and fight corruption and be, like self-fulfilled. So instead, it's easier to make medication artificial and overpriced, and to try to regulate and create sort of funnels for the people who have this power. But when it comes to the consciousness altering drugs, it's a function that combines ideas and the drugs related to them, because there's a culture connected to each drug, and each drug has a certain mindset around it. And so you can actually force a certain idea and set of patterns of behavior if you fill a certain community with a certain type of drug. And so each one like environment plus drug is what really it changes the dynamic of it. So if you have a ghetto and you put PCP in it, well, a lot of people are going to bad trip. But if you take PCP out of that context and you put it in another context, you might have a positive experience and you might be able to regulate it. I mean, there's groups that are devoted to the ethical use of cocaine out there.
Yeah,
And
I know
enough,
rappers. For the to your point, I know rappers and graffiti writers who do PCP, and they make fantastic art apparently on PCP.
The thing is, art, like you can take a bunch of drugs and try to make art with it, but it's gonna be filtered through it. So if you have someone making PCP art, you're like, okay, that's clearly PCP art. If you have someone, if you see someone making meth art, you're like, okay, that's clearly a meth head making art. And mushrooms or psychedelics, you can see that sort of manifests differently. And I think that we should probably be shifting towards medication that is natural, like he said, and blur that line between drug and medicine.
They should really put like art genres like by drug. Like you go to the cocaine record section.
I totally agree.
Oh yeah.
Cocaine
and absinthe.
I love
I think-
cocaine
I think
music. It's
that-
my
I
favorite.
think-
You get
I think
disco
that
and
it's-
like love pop. And
It's a dishonest representation of what these drugs are for and their function in our culture. Like we have to be honest with ourselves and recognize that most of the amazing things that we have around us are a result of someone taking a lot of drugs and being obsessed with.
That's
one
kind of how I
thing and
feel.
doing
I
it
feel
over
about
and over.
that's how I feel about coffee. Because I don't drink coffee, and like I'm really pro people drinking coffee. I like all my friends
Alright.
who do it.
Sure,
I have
but
no problem with it.
think of your favorite artist, like your favorite musician. Most
feel that way
of
about
them,
nicotine.
90% of them have been on some kind of drug.
I
at
think
some
a
point,
lot of
and we have-
I know this is a bad example, but coffee because grunge, dude, like Seattle grunge music is.
Oh
definitely,
yeah.
like-
Yeah,
So, like,
hipsters and
because
coffee.
I love a
Wasn't
lot.
that heroin though?
So here's the
And
thing.
nicotine.
I
Don't
love-
forget the nicotine. Nicotine is
Yeah.
very important.
I love
Every
Big
intellectual
Boy.
throughout history has
I
had
love-
nicotine.
I love drug music. I'm like,
Wait.
I love Prince. I love the Pink Floyd. I love the Doors. But the thing is, and I love New Wave. And I
The
love all that
Monkees?
stuff. The Monkees weren't on drugs, and Don Kirshner was like a Jewish like Zodic. You gotta respect that man. But I by the '80s, music, you got people that are like coming down from drugs. Like, and you can look at Playboy magazine commercials. So like, if you ever were to look at the ads in the thing, you can see the kinds of drugs that they're getting the girls with, and they're like, here's cocaine in the 50s and 60s until it gets to speed, and speed becomes the drug, and then there's acid, and you're like, whoa. And then all of a sudden they had this thing called Romulan, and Romulan was DXM tablets because they were giving people like they have in cough medicine now, extreme doses of DXM so that they could disassociate while they were coming down from like heroin and these drugs that they were taking in the 70s. In the 80s, you've got people that are coming off of the drugs. So sure, Kurt Cobain was on heroin, but he was super against a lot of drugs. A lot of people were against a lot of drugs.
The thing is,
And so
people
they-
were taking drugs unconsciously though, because they were consuming drugs.
Well, they were
through
crack
regular
babies.
culture.
They were
Yeah, but
crack babies, and their parents were all drug addicts, and they were terrified of drugs. And a lot of these
No, I
people
know,
were
but-
drinking coffee and smoking cigarettes, and they were.
But what
just
I mean
like-
is the drug. It's just they changed the type of drug to legal drugs instead. Instead, they started consuming sugar and
True.
food.
Yo,
Yeah, I
unrelated
don't know
note.
shit.
Unrelated
I
note,
like
by
it.
the way.
Can you see Kurt Cobain eating a donut?
I just
drinking-
about Kurt
Fuck
Cobain.
that.
About
He
yo,
probably
Kurt
wouldn't have
Cobain.
killed himself if he ate more.
All right. All right, I just want to interject, unrelated, but with Kurt Cobain, if he were alive today, I bet he would have loved cough syrup. He would have loved lean. Like he would have been all in that shit. Like
Yeah,
he
He
would
would
have
have
loved.
been. He would have been an amazing mumble rapper. I got.
He would have loved lean. He would if he only he was around. He would have loved that purple drink. It's like, yo, you take Sprite, you you mix it up in this cup.
But Kurt
Like,
Cobain would have lived through the 90s and 2000s and would have had access to like everything before the Forbidden Scroll. So in 2010, I think it was, or 14, China made this law that like was this crazy endless scroll that just like all the chemical formulas that they banned. But before that, you could get anything you wanted made in China, and everyone was doing like, especially like Usenets and all the different people like
well,
Paul Allen from Microsoft, and these big.
I mean, just with lean
on-
itself, it's weird how like now like you get you get the shitty stuff, which is like green cough syrup, and it's gonna cost you like whatever, like wholesale
It
prices.
doesn't even have codeine in it.
Yeah, to get the real codeine, it's gonna cost you like.
That's the thing. You shouldn't be trying to get codeine. The reason that people wanted the cough medicine was the DXM, dextrom.
Which was that heroin effect, yeah.
No, it's not.
Well,
So again, heroin is an extreme depressant and an opiate, right? DXM is a kind of I want to call it dissociative, but it's also like a delirium, and some people say it's a time travel drug.
It's like
Because-
robo tripping.
Yeah, Robitussin has DXM in it. Romulan had DXM in it. Those substances are, they can cause brain lesions apparently if you take them in large dosages. Like there's all kinds of problems with them. But in low dosages, they're safer than, giving someone opiates, right?
I've heard that about time travel too, though.
Right. Yeah. There are a lot
Yes,
of
brain
people who've had these, brain lesions from time travel. But there are a lot of people that have had circumstances where they're taking large dosages of DXM and they have like premonitions about things in the future. And like there have been studies done on it. So there's some interesting things there. I think there's also there's reasons why people should move towards like disassociatives away from depressants, because depressants slow your heart rate and are
Like
killing
alcohol.
people. Yeah, and it's really interesting that China is like produced fentanyl as this major problem, because China had a ketamine problem internally for like years.
It's the reverse opiate. It's the reverse opium wars, dude. They've learned everything. Their current diplomacies, everything they've learned from the British in the 1900s, reversing it back to the West as revenge due to the whole 100 years of accumulation. Also, before we get into too deep of a tangent of DXM, I wanted to mention two things. His first point being like, certain drugs shape a culture, sparks ideas. So if you watched Dr. Eamon Hill on Danny Jones' podcast, so if you've been following the Jesus is a mushroom crowd, the Gnostics that believe that Jesus Christ is a chemical drug or whatever.
Sounds good to me. Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah. So those people, like, I don't really believe what they say, but like there's definitely some to it because of the word krios in Christ. Yeah, so Dr. Eamon Hill, even though he's like the outlier of the Greek academic societies, he's purporting that the idea of democracy was founded on disassociatives and hallucinogens that were taken back in the rituals back in the day, which makes complete sense. It's like their true idealization of liberty and freedom.
Is he the author of Sacred Jesus and the Sacred Mushroom?
Yeah.
He wrote that.
No, not Eamon Hill, but not Dr. Eamon Hill, the person that wrote that book is what started that straight of this conversation. Yeah. So like which there's definitely I do see the Gnostic elements to that, and like there's definitely some validity to it, but like I don't take it as a whole. So
I think it probably calls to us further back. Like we know that there's something true about like our history with mushrooms is much deeper than we understand, and so whether like because the myth of Christ might actually be far older than we think, and this is a retelling that was used to control, because it's rehashing all these different older myths. So it could be that like the original one has a relationship with mushrooms, and that's why we're making that comparison now, because it's true. It's just we have the timing off, basically.
I'd take a
Please.
convolution of myths. I think the idea of like a Yeshua there's probably a Yeshua who's in a period of political unrest right before the fall of Jerusalem, who maybe had more to do with it than even the stories that were told. And most of the stories we have told are kind of convoluted, post, like, you, of course, you got ancient myths that are superimposed, but also the idea of Christ being like a pacifist who was sacrificed willingly for the state. I feel like is,
Right, the thing is, it's
blood sacrifice for you. Like, these seem like literal inversions of what this
right.
person was probably
Well,
actually
they say that some mushrooms grow under crosses, and those are psychedelic mushrooms. So
coincidence.
who knows? Like you talked about China having like this source of chemistry for people for a long time. They could make anything through China. Well, there's things. This is about monopolizing consciousness and the drugs that we take to alter it. And so there's some things that they can't stop, and that is spores. They just grow. It grows. The shit literally grows on it. Like we can have a psychedelic psilocybin transcendental experience with something that grows off of something that comes out of people's asses. We can't stop it. And so
I feel like
that
the thing is
great
that it's
struggle to have.
what's
Sorry, go on.
Spores are easy to harvest.
And this is important because like mushrooms, we were talking about this also earlier, have the same neurohormones as us, and there's definitely reasons why I think we should like replenish our neurohormones to be healthy. But a lot of the problem is trying to again, we talked about this earlier, trying to take drugs instead of doing like the life work you need to do. And I
Right.
don't think that drugs are like fasting and feeling what is happening around you, being in tune with those frequencies, is probably harder to do when you're all confused with substances.
Oh, I agree. But mushrooms should be used ceremonially. It shouldn't be used like every single day or like a party drug. It shouldn't be used like we think of drugs in our culture, which is entertainment and partying.
Okay, but hold on, because I did make some psychedelic Jesus art, so we shouldn't just like give up on the idea yet.
No, I think it's about wise use. You have to take this in the way that you can, work with it and grow with it, because it is a living organism and it is something that connects us with nature. It is the spirit of nature, so to speak, because that is what shamans take and then interface with nature with. So
Right.
Go for it.
I see this as both, right? There was literally a figure named Jesus Christ. The thing is, if you know about the history of Abrahamism, it was prophesied that a man that embodied these ideas wholly would exist from a virgin birth, etc. Like, that was the prophecy. So like, these stories have been told since millennia prior to the arrival of Christ, with some telephone interjections here and there, with like some Gnostic theology and whatnot being confused due to personal interpretations of the people at the time, as we see with the tabernacle and the Mosaic Law. But after the arrival of Christ, like, hey, here is a man that perfectly embodies the liberation we've been seeking. This man is going to lead us into a new kingdom of freedom and whatever. That was the whole idea of why people latch on to Christianity since then and now.
It could be that this has reoccurred. By the way, I mean we say that it's a rehashing of older stories, but it could just literally be that it keeps happening over and over.
Yeah, through prophets, but like what makes Jesus Christ different,
or through psychedelics. It could be
they're not mutually exclusive. I think the
also
Jesus mushroom thing.
It could be the prophets are just people who take a lot of psychedelics.
Speaking of holiness, I mean, as far as like substances go, like you look at alcohol, and yes, people could have their own thoughts about alcohol, but I honestly, first of all, there's like cultural practices of how alcohol is consumed, but I just want to say that when it comes to a lot of these things, they only come about when you have an abundance of something. So it's like a divine blessing. If you have, like Cat Williams said this, which is funny to quote Cat Williams, but he said, if you have too many potatoes, and eventually you're gonna come across making vodka, or if you have too much of something, you could make alcohol out of it. If you have too many grapes, you can make wine, right? But if you have too much milk and you let it go bad, you get cheese. So it's like if you have enough like abundance, or be able to manifest enough abundance within like a specific God-given resource, eventually you're going to be able to make something that could maybe like elevate your senses or elevate your like sensory experience to a point of like transcendental realization. Maybe you could have wine then that's good enough, or that gets you fucked up enough to start considering things, or maybe you could have like
Absinthe.
a cheese, yeah, or
Well, they-
absinthe or whatever, or
You know, they
even drugs.
microdose.
If I mean,
there
if you
were-
think
I'm
about
so
these,
glad you brought that up because like
Yo, all
the
these-
Scythians,
all these pills, they come from plants at the end of the day, right? Like,
Right,
when
right,
it comes
right.
to, yeah, like opiates and shit, like it really comes from stuff that
Right. Well,
comes from nature.
I mean,
See, that's the
Islam-
funny thing about vegetarians, man. Because I'm like, dude, plants are likely to kill you more than like a cow.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad you brought up that point because the Scythians were the first people to commercialize agriculture. They came up with the science, which is what they called Scythians. So Samaria becomes the first Scytho civilization, and then they, because of the abundance of grain, they were the first people to invent alcohol. So yeah, that makes perfect sense in terms of the relative progression of human technology. It's just like time and boredom plus abundance of resource. What can I make out of this? Also, your point, Chris, to like talking about how every intellectual use nicotine. The reason why they're saying that the current government right now is trying to shy away from tobacco-derived nicotine sources, like with the whole PMTA flavor ban on vape juices. Like reason being is because tobacco actually raises testosterone.
Oh
It
shit!
enhances free base testosterone in your body in both females and males, giving them a logical thought process.
Okay, so that's why smoking is sexy.
Smoke up,
It's
boys.
actually, it's
You heard it
actually
here
a
first.
chemical impact. That's amazing. That's crazy. That makes
Well,
sense.
it's
That tobacco
THC.
would have
Vitamin D, and nicotine combined makes your dick bigger. Dead ass. There's been a
Oh
study on this.
shit! I be smoking cigarettes at every party I go. I buy a pack of Marlboro Reds. I try to drive to
milkshake.
Jersey because it's
I-
I'm
cheaper.
suspicious of
I
all
put a
of
bit
it.
of tobacco in my weed, so I guess that makes sense.
Yo, pro tip:
Yeah,
if you
but,
live in New
just
York
to-
City, don't
just-
ever buy a pack of cigarettes in New York City. Fuck that shit.
Grow
Just go
your
to New
own
Jersey,
tobacco.
buy like 10 packs.
I wanted to touch on the Jesus is a mushroom thing, because if you wanted to get really schizo with it, what's the Roman numeral for? Oh wait, no, hold on one second. Mate.
No, that's autistic. That's not schizo. It's
Oh, never
numerology.
mind. No, my thesis was wrong. I was going to try to link Mary to dairy, but D is 500 and not 1,000.
See,
It doesn't
you're not,
have the same numeral.
you're not schizophrenic enough.
Shit.
It's a nice
I
effort.
didn't-
A for effort.
Maybe
Kurt,
in
what do
another
you-
timeline.
What do you think, Kurt?
Where are we?
Drugs, I guess. We're talking
And
about drugs.
nicotine. Do you smoke nicotine, Kurt? Do you smoke cigarettes or pipes? Or I feel like you're a pipe man. You'd be a pipe man.
He rolls his own cigarettes.
No, I don't know when the last time I smoked a cigarette is. So
He's a good boy.
Have you tried a rhino horn?
no.
Do you
You
drink
try
a
to
lot
pipe.
of coffee? Do you drink a lot of coffee?
I mean, some days I get caffeine. I'm trying. I don't know. I'm trying to keep almost everything to a minimum these days. Just
You
Kurt,
should be drinking
you
black
could-
coffee more though, because
Kurt,
What kind
with
of milk do you
age-
drink?
You could be a Mormon, bro. Just stay on that path.
No, but Kurt, sir, drinking
The
coffee. lowers
Amish really got
cancer.
it right, though.
Techno Amish.
Drinking,
Yeah,
drinking black coffee by itself every day lowers your risk of getting cancer. Also boosts your metabolism.
Also, 8,000 people a year die from coffee-related. I think it's like cardiac arrest is like a major.
Yeah,
But
because
I mean,
they're putting
everything has a
because
pros
drinking
and cons.
Starbucks. It's not coffee. They're drinking
Oh, yeah.
Starbucks.
Caffeine
everything
itself can cause adenosine.
Everything causes a debuff and a buff.
I bet you every bank robber drinks coffee before they do something, or every murderer who really plans out their job drinks coffee. I bet you every criminal who's serious about their criminal career drinks
I
fucking
don't know.
coffee before they do their shit. Like,
Or
fun
they do
fact,
something better.
I don't need your blood coffee.
every hitman, every bank robber, I bet they all love the shit out of that
How
bodega
heavily-
Starbucks coffee. They fucking
Maybe,
love it.
Maybe.
They
No,
love
no,
cold
no, no.
brew.
They're way
Yeah,
classier than that. They're way classier. Do you think
They have-
you think they stop at Starbucks? No, they have some like someone making
Tim
coffee in
Hortons.
their house for them. Tim Hortons, the Tim Hortons assassin. Ice cap.
Yo, I
Hit
do
you
know
with the
this.
shovel.
First of all, I have been around like white collar criminals, like fraudsters and shit, and every like person who I've known who makes money illegally off of scams from like fishing or whatever, they all drink coffee. Like
Oh
they
yeah,
were
yeah,
all-
but that sounds like like Trailer Park
and they were
Boys
and
level
they were
crimes.
and like 90% of them were Eastern European.
It's
They're
not.
geniuses. They were very smart dudes, but
It's
they just happened to
Yeah.
be like
Coffee's a big problem in
Russian.
Bosnia. And yeah.
it's not coffee though specifically. It's the stimulant aspect. For some reason there's a correlation with high IQ people and their addiction to stimulants. And for some reason, it's a performance booster, allowing you to think faster. It stimulates your frontal lobe, giving you that satisfaction of I can think now. Like
Augmenter. It's important. We do need augmenters and food, like all sorts of things. They act this way, that they boost us in one way or another, but it comes at a price. So you have to choose wisely, and you have to know the price you're paying for what you consume and what you allow your brain to be a part of.
Yo, I'm surprised this didn't come up, but we got to talk about this. How do you guys feel about Adderall? Because I feel like Adderall is it's very powerful. It could
It
literally. I'm sorry. What are you guys gonna say?
oh yeah, so it destroys. So like being myself, like one of those kids that got experimented on in the 2000s with the amphetamine craze. I got misdiagnosed with ADHD and was forced fed adult doses of Vyvanse and concerted Adderall since I was in second grade. And then I was having adverse reactions like developing OCD and
That's a
like,
hell of a cocktail.
right. So,
Okay, but look how you turned out.
yeah, without friends, but
We're here
But,
for you. What do you.
Yeah, man, we're friends. We're all friends here.
gotcha. But
I like your ears.
The point is that so having having all these adverse reactions to it and not realizing what's going on is what motivated me to study this field of subject. But I realized it drains the gray matter in the brain, which is why all these genius kids are end up burnout, depressed, and whatnot. God. It's been so long since I looked back on this. Like, I forgot a lot of my material that I studied.
You gotta
but
not take dextroamphetamine, methamphetamine, bromoamphetamine, all at the same time. That seems
Amphetamine
like
salts, none of
there's
that
like
shit.
isn't
Yeah.
there like seven? And Adderall has like 17 different kinds of amphetamines or like phenethylamines.
How
at the
did
same
they
time.
do
Well,
it? How
is that-
did we live
It's
for
because it
thousands of years without this
stimulates
stuff?
the pathways that already exist in your brain, as opposed to like others. If you're like learning new, like the reason that it fucks with your gray matter is because it's just like it's juicing up the stuff that's already there, as opposed to what do you call it? Stimulating like neuroplasticity or whatever, which is
right.
really
It
bad.
also it's deteriorating your myelin sheath. So yeah, you're like how like, smart people tend to have a very fast synaptic response in their brains. In order to quell the outlier in society, the geniuses that would solve solutions, they want everybody docile to the same muddy gray populace, right? So in order to do that, you got to quell the geniuses. Which is the whole MK Ultra project study, sub project 7 that they did on Ted Kaczynski. That's the results of that is what came forward with the whole amphetamine push. That was the initial Xanax. The reason being is because I said it deteriorates your myelin sheath and gray matter. So the people that were able to formulate well coherent thoughts at a much rapid pace than others are no longer able to do so, turning them into burnouts.
R.I.P. us.
No, but I
Yeah.
mean, like we have thousands and thousands of years of like ancestral memories and in our DNA. We have this ingrained in us, and at some point, our bodies are going to have a reaction, and we're going to reject we're going to reject the status quo that is being pushed naturally. Like when people don't have homes anymore, they don't have houses. Eventually, you're going to be like, oh yeah. Like I'm supposed to be able to have my own land and do my own thing, and like this is just how nature has wired me, and we're gonna have to. They might call it reverting, but it could be, it could be an archaic revival, and we could have a sort of renaissance that allows humanity to break free from the structures that have been put on top of us, and we can just be again, while also using the miraculous genius and industrial gain that we have created. We don't have to keep running downward forever.
Well, the thing is, it's really scary. It's very scary and terrifying to look at every single person everyone you love, everyone you hate, and look at them as just another version of yourself, as just another soul living out a different lifetime, like the same soul living out a different lifetime in a different body, you know, like it,
Yeah,
which
but
is
terror is everywhere. I mean, it's terror. It's terror to think of something else as well. Like,
I'm
you know,
just saying.
it's
I'm just
scary
saying
to think you're
if
not
you're
me.
used to growing up in a framework of tribalistic like distinction of like or maybe you've reinforced this idea of my sexuality is my identity, my gender identity, or my nationalistic identity, or my cultural identity, or my oppressed identity, whatever the fuck it is. Like if you feel this idea of like us versus them, and you let that become your entire governing force behind the paradigm of your reality, like
Right.
you're gonna have a really bad fucking time. Like unless
So
you look at everybody as like just, you know, I don't know, just another version of you, you know, like just because like to harm
sure.
me, again, to harm me is to harm you, and
Yeah.
whatever. Like
Namaste. That's the basis of namaste. But I mean, it's true at its core. We have to, you know, like there's issues with how we perceive and process self. We don't understand what self is, so we take things and we go, this is me. This is what self is, and we go, okay, well, it's my gender identity, or if you're really into music, it's your genre identity, and like it really it will latch on to anything we can. We'll be like, oh, I'm an old soul, or I'm gay, or I'm straight, or like whatever you're proud of really becomes your identity at the end, and that is the problem really, because you're not any of these things. You are the experiencer experiencing all of them. You know, you are not a woman, you experience womanhood. So it's not the same thing, and we suffer as a result, and that's terror. You know, like that's true terror. We're all alone in the world, and we're all our own little special thing, and we all have
I
our
have
own little
one
title.
Yeah, you just described the
interjection.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, one interjection there. Well, you're right, but we talk a lot about like identity politics, but it's really good if we could think about things the way we've constructed everything as like identity consumerism. Like, there's a reason I think I brought up like I took my dad out to Father's Day, and I was like, where do you want to eat? Like, we can go out pretty much anywhere, we can sit down, whatever. And he chose to go to Chick-fil-A. And like, there are myriad of reasons why you could go there. Sorry to actually name a corporation while we're doing this, but no, like people latch on to things like Chick-fil-A, even though it's fast food. They treat it like it's the best thing ever, and it's because it aligns with their identity and or political beliefs. And so that's a huge reason behind it. And so it's like you are the thing that you consume, and so that is a thing that ends up reinforcing the process. We
Right.
can and advertising, it just made it
So,
into a big
but
machine. And
that goes back to what I was saying about the drug and the idea that connects to it. They try to sell you something to consume, and then they latch on an idea, a meme to it, and that is essentially the psyop. It's always going to be like,
you just
here's. Sorry, go on.
sorry to interrupt, but you just described the definition of sin. The reason why this is perpetuating, because with each generation we stray further from God. So the unfortunate thing about everything you just said is that this happens in cycles. Yes, there's a natural human pushback against the current status quo, and we call this the age of Aquarius. But this has happened in the 1800s, the 1880s, the 1960s, the 1910s, 1920s, 1960s, and now it happens in cycles. Yet when there's no progression, either due to government, CIA meddling, or just people naturally fall into complacency. That age-old meme of weak men create bad times, stuff like that.
Yeah.
I just got Nachi Keta. Yes.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the more physics and empirical science progresses, the more we realize we're in a simulation, and with that esotericism, with that tangent of esotericism, you come to realize, hey, our living plane is samsara. We are cursed to repeat the same cycles over and over again because the human ego can't learn from its own folly. we're stuck repeating the same mistakes of our ancestors, and we call that traditionalism. And this is perfectly described in the Bible in Ecclesiastes 1. As King Solomon, the wisest man ever lived, says everything is meaningless as everything, happens in cycles. Yes, there is going to, so as much as we want a period of an intellectualism and Renaissance and Platonism.
I mean, aside from cycles, right? Like you could also call
Right.
it patterns. Like patterns are like kind of, they function the same way as cycles. So that's how I would say it. It's like everything is built up of patterns. You can, and the thing about patterns is, I said this before in the chat, like they're not made of physical matter. You can't like hold patterns in your hands, but there's something that exists. Like patterns govern the cycle of seasons. Patterns govern like the revolutions of the earth around the sun and whatnot. Like patterns like govern cosmic forces pretty much. Patterns govern your internal forces too. Patterns govern your processes. Like you eat
It's a
sleeping
matrix.
shit. Yeah, exactly. Like you eat sleeping shit like every other human being. That's a pattern. Like patterns literally govern your reality, the way you think in patterns, the way you behave in patterns, and like the way you feel in patterns. That's another important distinction that people
Which is
don't
why
really
the
understand.
elites fear the neurodivergents like us.
Yeah, because
So-
they're the ones who
Yeah.
they're less likely to like tune into the same like music that every other person, like 90% of the other people are listening
That
to,
seems-
which makes them kind of govern the same emotional patterns, like directed in a specific way.
That seems to be like a psychic immune system thing. Like we're
A psychic
rejecting-
defenses, yeah, it is.
Yeah,
Psych,
we're-
it's a form of psychic
this
defenses.
is where I believe in Methodism, right? Like I was talking about this with another friend of mine, where I somehow believe that the pattern recognition, the intuitive pattern recognition that we have, that most people don't, is a gift from God. Where like it's a predestination of choosing who's saved, who's not. And that's where I align with Methodism. So my entire life, I've tried to understand why people literally, even with the answers in front of them, refuse their own salvation.
Is
I
method
think
is
that
Methodism
people are-
anything like yoga? Like I feel like method. I don't really know enough about Methodism. Is
Wait,
Methodists do they do like work? Like do they do physical things or do they
Okay.
do like method? What is
No,
it?
they're more the cold Christians, if anything, because they already believe everything is set in stone prior to their birth, so they don't really
Oh,
need
like
to go out.
Calvinists? I freaking
Calvinist is actually
I
the
don't
opposite.
I don't have time for like that right this second, but we should really talk about why it doesn't make any sense to me that everything is predestined and ordained, because it's kind of like a cop out for the Holocaust, like
It's
that's
both.
cool, like,
Everything
God
is in
meant to let it
dualities, bro.
happen, and-
Everything about spiritualism, spirituality, esotericism, theology is dualities.
I feel like there's
That's
too
what
many
makes the
things.
whole.
There's too many things that we need to take responsibility for. That like it's
Right.
scary to like say things are predestined.
We've been given free will. I completely understand, but there's also the counter other side of the coin, which is Methodism. So it's Calvinism and Methodism both being right at the same time. That is the matrix we live under, which is why everything's so fucking confusing.
Nachiketa's
I
gonna.
say-
Oh, okay, wait.
Sorry.
But I want to hear Nachiketa because I brought him in just for this. I'm sure he's got something to say about it. But yeah, Kurt,
Okay.
go ahead. Kurt, go
I'll be
ahead.
fast.
Oh no, I mean, yeah, sorry, yeah, go ahead.
What we were just saying, it does tie into what we started with at the beginning of the podcast. It ties into it really well with what Andrew was saying. So things are destined to go in a pattern, but we're constantly in a fluid motion. Life itself is a force. It's a force that's constantly in motion. And so everything that we've constructed over the past, we'll say 100 years, 200 years, like we've constructed things to give us kind of, you could say, the illusion of stability. A lot of these big, Fortune 500 companies, like chances are, like nothing lasts forever, but there's probably going to be at some point where we just get collectively tired, like instinctually tired of going out and consuming the same products decade after decade. Like how much over the past 50 years has something, we'll say like McDonald's, how much has it actually changed? Not all that much in their fundamental business model. At what degree do we decide like this doesn't feel right, it doesn't feel natural, because it's not something that was meant to actually adapt with everything else? And that's true of not just like consumer products, but the entire structure that we have. And so I think really it's just collective exhaustion that can be seen as a partial reason of like, okay, this is not actually going to function because it's not actually fundamentally based in reality. I think that's what people don't realize is like there were some hardcore capitalists in the comment sections at the beginning, but I don't think that's one thing they realize is like none of this is fully attached to reality. Not even our money.
McDonald's owns
Capitalist Realism by Mark Fisher.
McDonald's owns Chipotle, and McDonald's owns Boston Market. McDonald's owns a lot of like, you know, different things. They don't need to just make hamburgers, but I feel like hamburgers.
Chipotle is a
how long are we going to be into
McDonald's
hamburgers?
is a bad analogy. The better analogy would be the rehashing of old movies.
Well, I think a hamburger is good because you think
That's
about the word, you think about the hamburger, and the hamburger has existed since at least like a guy in Hamburg went to Africa, and in Algiers he dealt with Berbers, and these Moorish and Berbers were eating like salted shredded beef that was fried, right? Which is kind of like a specialty the Ethiopians have, which is like a highly cooked version as opposed to their glub glub version of kitfa. So essentially we're talking about like 6 to 10,000 years ago or more that people have been eating hamburger, right? Like a flatbread, even sandwich, like Berber style hamburger. So I mean, how long can people love to eat a hamburger? Like apparently a long time, like forever. I don't know. I could eat a hamburger again. I don't know. Like I don't know. I mean, even I remember also like I was in this desert program for a long time, and they had this thing where like if you were good, they're gonna give you like neon cheese powder. And I was like, I don't want to be good or have neon cheese powder, so I'll just eat rice and beans every day. And I could eat rice and beans forever, you know? I don't know if that breaks the point of McDonald's, but that's also what Taco Bell is, and that's PepsiCo.
The counterpoint is it's not necessarily just about the product, because specifically McDonald's hamburgers did not exist 1,000 years ago. That's more of the point that I'm trying to make. We're trying to sustain the lack of uniqueness in something over a very long period of time, because everyone's going to make their own version of hamburger. If you make it at home, it's going to taste wildly different, of course. We're trying to make all of this repeatable, and chances are the entire chemical makeup of the hamburger, the flavor is probably significantly different because now we have a much differently domesticated cattle. If you go and you eat Longhorn burgers, they're going to have a more oily texture to them. So nothing is meant to be the same. Like life is nothing but just a constant changing, flowing process. And we're trying to keep up, you know, still being beams and pillars that are just trying to, you know, back this up and stop that flow. And it's just, it can't. It just can't. That's the issue, that it literally can't actually do it. And I don't think we understand how big and large that process is. It's like we can't even soak in how quickly these things just cycle over. And so that is the issue. I think people don't understand that you can't really just underestimate that force of life and change, and you can only back it up for so long until you're like, oh shit, now it's like the dam has actually been broken.
Yeah, you notice how there seems to be like an
underlying. I want to say real quick because we got like a $20 super chat, so it seems pretty base. L. Marie said the ancient temple is a scale model of the cosmos. Listen to the Ancient Tradition podcast with Dr. Jack Logan and have your mind blown. That's a legit shout out. I don't know if you mean the Ancient Tradition podcast, like this. Is this the Ancient Tradition podcast? But let me know if I found the right thing. I will definitely give it a listen for like such a nice super chat. Thank you. Sorry, go ahead.
You guys seem to notice there's like a underlying, like unspoken war against the world's attention span, and also memory span. I've noticed the collective American memory span is only 4 years long, and why that is because for this exact reason. How long can we put up with consuming the same shit over and over?
Yeah, well, it's a democratic cycle. Every 4 years is an election.
And it's directed energy that they're harvesting. Like they want to use it for revenue for their corporation.
It's the neuralizer cycle. It's the neuralizer in MIB. It's the TV set. That's what the neuralizer is. And as well,
it's also partially the reason why they want your brain overloaded on psychedelics. Essentially, your brain is an electromagnetic device, right? And it's think of it as wires. If you overload a circuit, it's not going to fucking work. So essentially that's what it's doing to your brain.
You know, the thing is when you make, let's say you have something like Adult Swim, for example. Adult Swim knows its audience. it knows its audience takes psychedelics, takes probably some other kind of drugs, and like they're fully aware of it. So they can actually plan this and make things that are going to make people have a certain experience and literally do the MK Ultra thing.
It's
Ultra,
real politics.
They would pump people full of psychedelics and then try to change their ideology or try to force an ideology on them. And then now people just take psychedelics themselves and then watch a thing that programs them. So, yeah.
The thing most people don't realize is we live under a paradigm of German idealism because the Nazis never lost. Hitler escaped to Argentina, and the SS got absorbed to the CIA. And with that being said, the people that controls the information war or the information plane is the CIA and FBI intelligence organizations, because we live under an American hegemony. And those people controlling it are the ones that voted for Hitler. So with that being said, we live under a paradigm of German ideology.
Man, I'm into Argentina.
Real politic.
If Hitler got to Argentina, which is possible, like I don't think he went to Bariloche anymore, although he had a house there. It's possible he went to San Bernardino. If Hitler didn't die, he wished he was dead. Like, are you kidding me?
Oh, yeah.
He had no more power. He had to shave his mustache. I think he had a black girlfriend and a little tiny Pomeranian that ended up eating his like version of Mein Kampf 2 he was working on. Life was hard. Life was not good. It was not his dream situation.
He's like, I'm still struggling.
Yeah.
Mind failure.
It was going to be a good book.
But the point I want to drive home was the reason why everything is so mundane, infantile, and like just cycles is because of real politic. It's suiting everyone's needs at the moment for now, and like just to quell the masses, keep them quiet, and so they can be subservient and obedient. Never planning for the future, never planning for future outcomes, never planning for contingencies. No, it's always just suiting everyone's needs for now, so they will just shut up and do what you say. And that is the paradigm.
Though. That's the surface.
That is the surface. Yes, there's definitely much deeper, but as
there's long-term plans, but maybe not for everyone.
Right.
The Brave New World is the one without you.
German idealism, my guy. They started communism, the Frankfurt School of Ideology, fucking subjectivism. You got Sigmund Freud's this perversion of sexuality. The idea. So these people hold onto the idea that God is dead, and then therefore everything is morally justified. It's the we're living in what's it called, that one book, the Prime Meridian or some shit.
Brave New World, 1984.
No. Blood Meridian. We live in a Blood Meridian age, which is why we're returning back to feudalism. Huh. Techno-feudalism is the future, because we so even though we call it even though we call our current system of economy capitalism, it's just all quasi. It's really just rebranded mercantilism, because we have yet to figure out a better exchange medium, which is why we're still like which is why laws from the 1800s still apply today, and also we're still like dependent on fiat.
What if we use like exercise as currency? So like, here, if you want this candy bar, you have to do 10 squats. You know, like
Netflix already did a.
I literally got a thing to make this. You set up a bike in every store that's loaded to like a generator, and you charge batteries with people just doing biking, and that's how they pay for their shit.
There's a place where you can do jumping jacks for train tickets.
Yeah, but you have to make it something that is useful for the system. You can't just be like, here's
that's
an
the folly of human idealism. We get an idea
people
that's good, and we try to apply it to a macrocosm, and then it ends up becoming a catalyst for suffering. So let's say we have an economic system dependent entirely on labor. It's just like physically exercising. People are going to be on a treadmill until they get a heart attack or die. Like there's going to be room for exploitation once there's a ruling class. So there's going to be any medium of exchange that we think is ideal and good is going to be eventually exploited by a ruling class to maintain their power, because that's just the human nature.
I mean, even TikTok NPCs are starting to burn out. There's that one Miles Morales NPC, and he had like a whole full mental breakdown on a live one.
Yeah, honestly, if he was making like 100 G's like every 3 months, it's totally worth it. Like what? After like 36 months of that, you finally like crash. It's like okay.
At the cost of your longevity, though, you're not going to live past 40 due to your cortisol levels.
Wait, was it a good life?
I don't know. That's subjective.
That's it. I mean,
Are you
person
winning
feels
or
they had a
aren't
good
you,
life.
son? That's all
Right.
it comes down to.
Yeah, he got to the finish line fast. That's all.
That's why dogs live shorter.
Yeah, unfortunately, the cycle of samsara, the elites, due to their generation of power struggles, they have created a world where nothing matters besides earning money. Moralism is dead. A god is dead. Idealism is dead. Politics is dead. Money is now dead. So what now?
Well, the God concept is rebirth, so there's probably going to be. I think that the concept of God is a technology, and it will adapt and evolve, and so eventually it'll turn into a new form of godhood, and we will that or emulate that.
That's the thing. That's the thing you see in California a lot. People, the narcissism in Los Angeles has reached a point where all those crystal hippies are now calling themselves God, or God is a female, or that. It's now we've reached a point of delusion.
I agree.
I got a thought on
agree.
that. All right, so I've been talking about this for a few days. Like, the satanic verses, Muhammad has a verse that talks about the three goddesses of Mecca, right? And the three goddesses of Mecca are interesting because, I mean, you're not supposed to talk about the goddesses. You're not supposed to talk about anything feminine or divine, but also that they're the three goddesses of Mecca is kind of similar to Hecate, who is the three-headed goddess, right? Or like the three aspects. And so I wonder, like, what do you think about that? Does that vibe anything?
Well, this is why Sam Shamoon calls Islam a pagan religion, because it has its roots and stuff like this.
Well, it's against us. They're saying they're against it.
They're against it now because
they
of
say
the
Muhammad.
19th.
They say Muhammad got like a demon, like it was not God that told him that verse. But like I think they're missing the point. Like obviously it is God. It's like the feminine.
Right. So yeah, like this is what I said earlier, like how the story of Christ was prophesized years before its existence, so people didn't have the correct interpretation. That's what we call paganism. It is the essence of the story of God being passed down to the lineage of Noah, and compartmentalizing itself through all these cultures, which is why there's this syncretic of Jesus and God and all these themes of Abrahamism, even in Korea, like the Chondogyo and whatnot. Like it's everywhere. But the thing is, a lot of our current interpretations or impressions of Islam is all due to the 1960s Reformation. It's from the Islamic Revolution. Islam used to be very chill. It used to be almost hippie tier prior to that, but due to the conservative backlash from in Iran, but with Iran falling into degeneracy, like the Weimar era, ever since its westernization, is what caused it. So, like, this is what people don't understand about politics. The West has entirely deluded itself with the mantras of never again, we can't repeat the Holocaust ever again, without ever realizing what causes it. It's like saying the history is written by the victors, and also but at the same time subscribing to the same ideologies and prescriptions that they give you. The reason why people in Germany, the populace of 50 million, voted for Hitler was because of the Weimar era, of the sheer degeneracy. The conversation we've been talking about this entire time of people have a natural instinctual reaction to because they're fed up with all this shit. And when that happens, you get a moralist overcorrection, as you see with the French Revolution. The initial the unfortunate part of the human condition is, like I said, you get something that's good, something that's ideally good, and then it ends up becoming corrupted due to the horseshoe effect or just the human nature itself. Initially, as you see with Germany, the 1930s, Germany was starting out really good. They recovered from the Treaty of Versailles, the economic crash. Hitler was named Time Magazine's Person of the Year in 1930. and stuff like that. And also the Olympics were held in Berlin because of, oh, look at all these European accomplishments. But then World War II happened, and we now know the consequences. It's because of that. Once you get a festering contentment against the current paradigm, this current status quo, you will get a moralist overcorrection of people that have been resenting this stuff silently and bottling it up until they explode. And that is something that we need to address more and more, or we'll never break out of the cycle.
Okay, cycles, yeah. People are more comfortable with loops, but in reality, it's supposed to work like a spiral upwards or a spiral downwards. That's really where what your patterns lead. I mean, everyone wants to lean on this idea where if I just do this, think this way, and feel this way in this cycle, then my life will stay the same. But it's not true. It's always moving upwards or downwards.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mean to be so heavy. You know, I was just... That's just what I intuited.
What a downer.
Yeah. I mean, shout out to the downers out there. I feel like I should. I mean, we try to be positive and we try to be high frequency and high vibrational, but I also want to give a shout out to the downers and the low vibrational people.
You sound like Theo Vaughn right now.
I got one. That was way too.
At this point in my life, I just care about objectivity and truth, because everyone's too scared and insecure. Everybody wants to be comfortable dying. Like, no, hey, you're not supposed to be comfortable. In order for there to be a solution, you must recognize the problem, and that starts with being bothered by the problem. The whole reason why Andreas knows me is because there was so much misinformation about Tartaria that I stepped up and was like, hey, there's all these resources that the English community has not gotten access to yet because of a language barrier. Here's what I've read. It's like that. It's the West has perfected command and control, or divide and control, through convenience. If you see no issue, if you see no reason to revolt, if your life is too comfortable, why would you ever? What would you ever break out the box? Yeah.
I just want to let you all know, if you feel like shit, I feel you, man. Like, if you feel like shit right now, I'm sending you love. If you feel like utter shit, I want you to know I'm sending you love.
Love you too, spirit of Theo Vaughn.
Hells yeah.
It shouldn't just be like I guess I'll say it. Don't feel like shit. Feel like you are the shit. I guess if we're gonna use that.
Well, you fun guys grow on shit.
Well, there you go.
With that, I'm done.
Or how about this? You have to go through shit to see flowers, right? You have to
Real, yeah. That is really the book of Genesis. The reason why Adam bit the apple was to experience the human condition, so that he can experience what is life without God, so he can truly understand, to appreciate God, and to utilize his free will to love God. Yeah.
I like that interpretation.